I opened our time in this chapel by talking about how we put down the weight of the world on Shabbat, the world of commerce, the world of work. But we don't put down all the weight necessarily. We don't put down the weight of Torah, and we don't put down the weight of what Torah is telling us about the moral challenges of our time. This week's Parsha, Shof'tim, is full of verses that seem to be speaking to just this moment. And as I read it this week, I couldn't help but think about a conversation I had last Shabbat morning. After I gave a broken-hearted and impassioned sermon calling desperately upon anyone who could hear me to use their voices and their actions to try to stop mass starvation and war in Gaza. After services, an Israeli woman came up to me to yell at me. She said that actually no one is starving in Gaza. She said that Israel is not blockading food aid to Gaza. And she pointed out that I failed to speak about the Israeli soldiers who are serving and dying in the war, and that that's why Israel has to blockade food from entering Gaza, because Hamas is eating the food and then killing Israeli soldiers. Her words were not surprising to me, as I hear from my Israeli friends that this line of defense and self-contradiction is often heard there, even as the streets are filled with 500,000 protesters. But the pain of her denial, on top of the devastating reality, was very hard to hear. And I said to her with sadness, it is true. It is true that thousands of people, maybe hundreds of thousands of people, are starving. And as she tried to shout me into silence, I said to her, in 5 years or in 10 years or maybe in 20 years, you're going to know that this was true. When she went on to tell me that Bezalel Smotrich, the Kahanist finance minister who's annexing the West Bank, is a good man and his supporters are good people and she voted for him, I realized just how far apart we were. This is the same Bezalel Smotrich who said in August of 2024 that, quote, it may be just and moral to starve and thirst 2 million people until they return our hostages, but the world will not let us. Yadenu lo shafchu et hadam hazeh, ve'einenu lo ra'u. That's Deuteronomy 21:7. Our hands didn't spill this blood and our eyes didn't see it. So say the leaders of the towns in our parsha when they find a dead body in an open field. They say these words as part of a ritual they perform to cleanse themselves from this death. Chizkuni says of this verse, you may ask if the Torah really thought that the priests and the elders who lived a far distance from where this murder occurred had really been suspected of having had a hand in this foul deed. Why should they need to declare that they were innocent of this crime? And Rashi interprets that what the elders are saying in this ritual is, we didn't see this person, and we didn't know that he went out on the road without enough to eat. If we'd seen and we'd known, we would never have let him go without enough food. Now, Rashi's referring in his comments to a suggestion in the Talmud that this person, after having been denied his needs, fought with others for food, and that is how he died. Ibn Ezra points out that shafchu, the word meaning spill, as in our hands didn't spill this blood, is spelled with a hey instead of a vav, and he says that the singular formulation is pointing to each one of their hands, every hand that could have acted and did not. We did not see, we did not know. It's not totally clear in the context of Torah whether the elders who perform this ritual are taking responsibility or evading it. But the rabbis insist that the ritual indicates a communal obligation to never let a person be hungry. They cannot tolerate a scenario in which any Jewish leader would knowingly allow a person to go without enough food, even a person who didn't live in their town, even a person who was a stranger to them. Pretending that you do not see, pretending that you do not know, if you do see and if you do know, is abject moral failure. But amidst her denial, the woman who spoke to me last Shabbat said something that was true. And she made me realize that I have been wrong. Almost every week that I've had a chance to speak since October 7th of 2023, I've spoken about those who were murdered that day. I've spoken about the hostages, and I've spoken about the horrors being committed against innocent Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank. I might have by now given 50 sermons, begging and pleading and shouting and crying out for a hostage deal and an end to this war. But only very rarely have I spoken about Israeli soldiers. 455 Israeli soldiers have been killed since October 27th, 2023. And the Jerusalem Post reported in March that 50% of all soldiers who were treated for injury also experienced psychological distress. Before this war, a total of 62,000 Israelis had been killed or wounded in all previous battles combined, which happens to be about the same number as the Palestinians who've been killed in Gaza since October 7th. But just staying with the Israeli military casualties for a moment, according to the Jerusalem Post, this war has almost 3 times the rate of trauma and psychological injury than Israel's previous wars. There have been 18 reported suicides of active duty soldiers in 2025 alone. One might wonder whether the elevated rate of trauma and psychological injury experienced by Israeli soldiers has more to do with the fear of killing hostages, or the tunnel system and the integration of Hamas into the civilian population, or the number of innocent Palestinians, including women and children, whom these soldiers have killed and maimed. Possibly all of the above. Or, as we know happens in other wars, the cloud of illegitimacy that hangs over a war is devastating to the soldiers who serve in it. Think of the widespread suspicion that Netanyahu wants to fight the war indefinitely, not because it is good for Israel, but for political reasons and to stay out of jail. We know now that Netanyahu repeatedly avoided, rejected, and sabotaged hostage deals, as reported most recently by former U.S. State Department spokesman Matthew Miller. From the rhetoric of Israeli ministers alone, many suspect that the real reason for the war continues is the settler agenda to reoccupy the land, and even the criminal agenda to expel the Palestinian people, which is ethnic cleansing. All of these things have been quoted or reported during the course of the war, that Netanyahu is aiming to fight the war for decades, as he reportedly told Anthony Blinken, that Israel is in negotiations with South Sudan to deport the Palestinian people from their land, that ministers are planning waterfront estates and settlements along the Gaza coast. Earlier this month, a group called Commanders for Israel's Security, which includes over 500 Israeli former military and security officials, wrote to Donald Trump, asking him to pressure Israel to end the war. The letter, signed by former heads of the Mossad and the Shin Bet, stated that Hamas no longer poses a strategic threat. Former IDF intelligence chief Amos Malka said Israel was, quote, well over a year past the point where we could have ended the war with a sufficient operational achievement, unquote. Former Shin Bet head Ami Ayalon argued that the war was no longer just and was leading to, quote, the loss of Israel's security and identity. This week, Israeli Army Chief of Staff Eyal Zamir pleaded with Netanyahu to take the hostage deal that's on the table and not to proceed with the assault on Gaza City. He said that the IDF cannot guarantee that the hostages won't be killed by IDF soldiers or executed by Hamas if the army draws near. Some soldiers are asking themselves if it is right or good to be participating in this war, to be risking their lives for this war. So you can see why these next verses of our parsha also stood out to me this week. In Deuteronomy chapter 20, we read, before you go to battle, the officials shall address the troops as follows. Mi ha'ish asher bana vayit chadash v'lo chanacho yelech v'yashov leveto. Is there anyone who's built a new house that hasn't dedicated it? Let him go back to his home, lest he die in battle, and another dedicate it. Umi ha'ish asher nata kerem v'lo chilelo yelech v'yashov leveto. Is there anyone who's planted a vineyard but has never harvested it? Let him go back to his home, lest he die in battle, and another harvest it. Umi ha'ish asher eres isha v'lo lechacha yelech v'yashov leveto. Is there anyone who's betrothed but who has not yet taken his wife in marriage? Let him go back to his home, lest he die in battle, and another take her. Ve'amru, mi ha'ish hayar'eh v'rach halevav yelech v'yashov leveto. Is there anyone who's afraid or tender of heart? Let him go back to his home. Please, please, God, let the day come now, soon, immediately, when all of Israel's soldiers will hear these words. Yelech v'yashov leveto. Go, go, return to your home. It is time to go home. Can you hear that, son?